The New York Giants just traded Dexter Lawrence to the Cincinnati Bengals for the 10th overall pick. Let's talk about how we feel about what this does for the Giants. They trade away one of their best defensive linemen, possibly of the last 10 years, a guy who was an all-pro, stalwart at D tackle, coming off a down year. Understandable, but man, I mean, like, most guys just can't do what he does at nose tackle. Like, this is a different kind of cat.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous. About the past, about the people.
If you've ever seen Dexter Lawrence live, let me tell you something. That's the kind of dude you go, oh, he make big people look tiny. Dexter Lawrence is a giant of a human being, and he was a New York Giant up until last night. Saturday night, we get a big trade, and we lose. The Giants end up losing their stalwart D tackle, and they do get the 10th overall pick, a top 10 pick for a player that it wants a new contract. And we'll talk about this. Let's talk about the Dexter Lawrence situation, right? Went into this offseason wanting a new deal. He had no more guaranteed money on the contract, had about $21 million salary, give or take. The situation with the Giants right now was interesting, right? You got a new head coach. You have a GM that's been there for a bit, and apparently, Lawrence made noise about it in the offseason last year that he was underpaid as a D tackle after some deals were made. Then we go into this offseason, we see Jordan Davis with the Eagles get a deal. Now Dexter Lawrence was, when you account for his salary, the 11th or 12th highest paid D tackle, which does happen. Like, that's a thing that, players will overcome you, even players who are not as high performers of you at your position, they will overtake you in the contract situation. It just happens. It's just part of the NFL life. It's part of the NFL contract structure. I actually think this was more about the guaranteed money that he had left on the deal. He had no more guarantees. He had no guaranteed money this year, but he was probably getting that money. He was probably getting his $21 million or $20 million in salary that he was getting this year. Minus the workout bonus that he was missing by not hitting all the workout bonuses that he could hit. But yeah, he was probably getting 19 to 20 million this year, which definitely, I mean, for the trading team, the Bengals, that gives you something. Now, we also know the Bengals did extend him at this point. They gave him a $28 million extension, 1 year. That's all they did. One extra year on the contract, $28 million. We don't know the details. We don't know how much guaranteed money he got out of that, what signing bonus, any of that kind of stuff. That will come out later on. But when we look at what the Giants were going back and forth with him on, we don't know. There's been a lot of rumors from the New York Post saying that his agent didn't want to deal with Joe Shane, that he was only dealing with Donna Ponte, and Chris Merritt didn't want the player to go ahead and talk to the head coach in dealing with the contract situation. I'm not sure how much value I put into some of that information, because it's also the same guy who reported a week ago that there was no interest in Dexter Lawrence and that they were going to have a hard time getting a high-value pick for him. And then all of a sudden they get a 10th overall pick for him. So I don't know how much I believe in a lot of these stories. I think a lot of the Giants beat reporters now are posturing and covering up for the fact that the Giants lost a really good player. And if he ends up being a very good player going into next season and he goes back to what he was like, and I think if you are a person who's an avid fan of the NFL, likes good play, and likes interesting players, you are a big fan of Dexter Lawrence because he is a very unique kind of cat. Again, a high-end pass rusher at nose tackle is a rarity. There are not a lot of those in the NFL. He was one of one. He was a special kind of D tackle. He's the kind of guy you build your defense around. Now, he is older. He's 28 years old. That's not really the falling off age for D tackle. We've seen guys play into their 30s at D tackle. I mean, you look at Calais Campbell. He's almost going to be 40 and still playing at a high enough level. You look at Cam Hayward. All these guys who are playing at very high levels in the NFL at D tackle. The drop-off was not looking like it was coming soon with Dexter Lawrence. He is coming off a down year. How much of that, though, is two things? One, you have him coming off the injury and not being able to fully be ready for the season and having his practice reps reduced down during the last offseason because of the elbow injury. And then you also look at, the D coordinator, Bowen, who I believe actually cost Daboll his job. I mean, he literally cost the Giants the Dallas game. You look at him lining up defensive backs, I don't know, 30, 40 yards back. Hey, let's go ahead and line up our DBs in the parking lot. Maybe they won't be able to get a field goal, everybody. Just blew that game with Dallas. Blew a lot of games. That defense was badly called, badly run. And by the way, if you have a bad coordinator, you don't know what you have as far as players go. You just don't. The alignments, where you're putting them on the field, and how much coverage you're getting for the time that you need to be able to utilize the pass rush that you have. It was just, Bowen was a bad DC. Terrible in 2025. It looked like there was something there in 2024, and maybe that's why they kept him, but they let him stay for too long, and he was a coward. He was absolutely a coward, ran way too much prevent. That was not really run very recently. Like, it was more stuff you would run, I don't know, like 20 years ago. Just some really terrible play calls by Bowen. And, like, listen, that has an effect. You cannot assess your players if they are, you just have a bad year at defensive coordinating. Like, if they are not being put in the best position. Now, I heard a lot of people talk about the year prior, and, he was coming off of his best season, also got injured during that season. 10 sacks, got injured. So, like, everybody wants to play it. You can't play it both ways here. You can't, and I think, you can play it both ways, I guess. But my argument here is, I think you have to look at it as, this was probably a mulligan year for Dexter Lawrence. It was with a bad DC, a turnover at head coach, a just terrible situation. And I think Dexter Lawrence was on the track to rebound and be great. Now you look at the situation going into all this. Joe Schoen, not very well liked by the players. Not very well liked at all. I remember the NFLPA report card. He was graded a D+. Wow, D+. That's the lowest grade any GM got on the NFLPA report card this year. We don't know how many players may or may not have aired their grievances in the NFLPA survey for the NFLPA report card, but I don't think it was zero. And it's still pretty bad that, if the sample size is on average the same for every team, which we don't technically know, but I'm pretty sure the NFLPA is probably keeping a good eye on what the sample sizes are per team. There's a good amount of players per team that probably get to fill out these cards and get to have their say in it. The idea is to give everybody an idea of how your feelings on it. If there was one player and they gave him a D+, I'm pretty sure they would be like, guys, you guys got to fill this stuff out, right? Like, we can't just have one guy filling out really bad report cards. You would see the outliers there. And maybe it is an outlier. Maybe that's the only thing. The problem is, it's not the only problem with Joe Schoen. Joe Schoen's been reported to have had terrible interactions with players. Specifically, the big one I remember was the Nick McLeod situation that got reported about a year or two ago, where he threatened to, not just threatened to cut the guy, but told him not to pay his rent the next month because he was getting cut. Just like very bad demeanor. Like, this is why you talk about the, other NFL teams and how they handle player contracts and structures and renegotiating contracts. You look at the Eagles, right? I know Giants fans are going to want to talk about the Eagles. They don't like the Eagles, right? They're, the team across the way. They're your rivals. But you got to look at what they do well in order to compete with them. And one of the things that Howie Roseman does well is, I think he has learned to have a personal connection with players. Try to warm himself up to players, even if you have to cut them. That's something that was talked about by people who have been brought up by Howie Roseman, people who have moved on from the Eagles and went to other organizations. That has been something that's been talked about, is developing those player relationships as a GM. And so that, like, you wouldn't, if you had a good relationship with a player, you wouldn't go to a guy who is a veteran fringe starter, veteran, a depth guy, and say something very callous and rude as far as don't pay your rent this month and use expletives. Listen, it's a business. But, like, Shane has not apparently been treating it like a business. And that's been that could create some issues, especially if other agents have had other dealings with this GM where people got offended, people got upset, where it's like, dude, I can't believe he would say something this aggressive. Is this so weird, and treating it so off? And this is probably why we're hearing from the New York Post. And I don't necessarily give all the I don't know if I want to listen 100%. I don't know how much credibility I give to everything that you hear as far as New York media reporters, but maybe that's also why Dexter Lawrence and his agent didn't want to deal with Joe Schoen. And I understand, because agents talk. This is something that gets talks about around the league. And if you are a general manager who can't get along with agents, can't get along with players, a big part of this game, a big part of this league is getting guys to want to play for you, especially if you live in certain markets at discounted rates to get them to stay on their contract. Maybe if Joe Schoen had a good relationship with Dexter Lawrence's agent and Dexter Lawrence, maybe they kind of figure out what the number is that Dexter Lawrence would have stayed for. And I actually do believe Dexter Lawrence, there was somewhere in the ether where Dexter Lawrence would have stayed. There was some way of fixing it. Now, here's the thing. It's not, we're not at DEFCON 1. We're not at the worst situation ever, DEFCON 5, whatever the worst one is. I can never remember the DEFCONs. There's so many DEFCONs. I think there's 5 of them. And one of them is good and one of them is bad. I can't remember which is the absolute best or worst situation, but I don't think you're at either scenario. You're not in the absolute best situation. You're not in the absolute worst situation. You got the 10th overall pick. I think that's good. You got some extra cash, right? The real thing here is the cash money you're getting as well. Cash money and an extra pick. There's a lot of value to be had there. What can you do with the extra cash money? What can you do with that pick? You have the 10th overall pick. You have the 5th overall pick. I think trading down from the 10th overall pick is going to be hard. And you're like, Walter, why are we talking about trading down? Who are we going to take at 10? Why don't we take Caleb Downs? Why don't we take this guy? Your odds of hitting at the 10th pick and getting what you got for and getting a Dexter Lawrence type player at any position, but specifically Dexter Lawrence plays a very specific position, right? There's a reason why a team was willing to trade a top 10 pick for him. He is that good. And he also plays a very unique position that has very high value. Again, there's not a lot of these dudes made in the NFL. Dexter Lawrence is like one of like rarefied air, even for defensive tackles. And so, like I said before, this is a guy you build your defense around, and yet you've traded him away. You can't draft a safety at 10 and think, that's the replacement. We got a safety for a D tackle. That's going to be great. You're paying that safety at a much higher rate you would than if you just signed a safety in free agency. This is also where we have to come to the discussion of drafting styles in the top 10 as well, where these positions, tend to have a higher hit rate in free agency than they do in the draft. They tend to be positions that teams are willing to let walk in free agency, linebacker and safety. And so drafting them in the top 10 is not super valuable. Whereas you look at positions like wide receiver, offensive line, specifically tackle, and actually interior defensive linemen. Apparently, if they are very good, the top guys don't leave their team very often. So you look at a guy like at 10, and you look at who's going to possibly be there at 10. This is why the Bengals did this deal. They looked at who was going to be there at 10, and maybe their best case scenario was Ruben Bain. That's maybe. That's if Ruben Bain doesn't go before their pick. And the Bengals are actually a team, I mean, there's a whole discussion to be had about the Bengals on this whole situation, and I will do a video on that. This is mostly a Giants video. You look at what the Bengals are getting but from what the Bengals were probably looking at was, who are we going to get at 10? Maybe we get Caleb Downs or Sonny Styles if he falls, or if we have to be aggressive and trade up, which, by the way, not a Bengals move to trade up. This is the most aggressive thing I've seen the Bengals do in years. And so it is an impressive move that they were willing to do this. But now you look at the top 10, there's a reason why. Who would have been there at 10 that makes their defense better than what Dexter Lawrence does and the way that Dexter Lawrence does? That creates pass rush, that opens up lanes. And that, by the way, that's a team that has a lot of good depth pieces at defensive line because they were not expecting to trade for Dexter Lawrence. They had signed Jonathan Allen in free agency. They already had B.J. Hill on the team. So now you have a good rotation of D tackles. He's not the only guy there. And you can build that defense around what Dexter Lawrence does. They still have their top 50 pick. Wow, this is becoming a Bengals discussion. And I still think what the Bengals got out of this was a very good player. Now, what are the Giants losing? I think the Giants are losing a strength. One of the reasons why I felt very bullish over the last few years about the Giants was Dexter Lawrence, right? I liked adding Brian Burns to that room because of Dexter Lawrence. I liked drafting Abdul Carter because of Dexter Lawrence, because Dexter Lawrence plays a position that is very hard to get pass rush at, and he was doing it. And he was doing it at a very high level for a while. Even if he never gets to the number one level, if he's top 5, he's worth it. If he gets back to very, very high levels of pass rush productivity, if it's top 5 for a D tackle, it's probably number 1 for nose. And he's doing it at a spot that is so hard, and you're getting double teamed all the time, that you're opening things up for guys like Brian Burns, who had a career sack season last year. You're opening things up for Abdul Carter. You're opening things up for other players. And that is what Dexter Lawrence does. He opens up the defensive line. He was a strength. And now, this is not to say the sky is falling. You have new cash flow. You have an extra pick now in the top 10, and you can utilize that pick to help replace what you lost. You're not going to replace him 1-for-1 in this draft, and you're not going to replace him with the new cash flow that you have from moving on from Dexter Lawrence. But both can help heal that wound. And you're not going to get that from drafting Caleb Downs at 10. You're not gonna. Now, if you can find a way to maneuver and get some extra day 2 capital, you might be in the starting moves of at least helping this team heal. What if they don't trade down, Walter? We'll get to that. And we'll get to the rest of what this team's done this offseason, but so much of this offseason is surrounded by this defense and Dexter Lawrence and this defensive line, because when you walked into this offseason, what did you look at? You looked at a terrible DC and a lot of talent that looked like it should have hit last year on defense, and it didn't. Terribly. The only thing that was good was Burns, and some of that, again, is because you had all the other pieces there. When you have an Abdul Carter, a Kayvon Thibodeau, a Dexter Lawrence, somebody's going to get the sacks. Somebody's going to start looking good. That's why Brian Burns started looking really, really good. It's not because he wasn't good, but you had a lot of good on that D-line. And now you got to figure out. Now, one of the big problems they've had has been run defense. Run defense also tends to have issues along the lines of scheme. Where are you lining guys up on the defensive line? Where are you lining up your linebackers? Where, how good, and yes, linebacker tackling does come into play on that. Linebacker athleticism, also coaching. So there were ways that they could address this. If they had kept Dexter Lawrence. Again, I liked the idea that they brought in DJ Reader for the interview last week and a workout, and maybe they're probably going to have to sign him now. But I thought even if they never traded away, even if they had extended Dexter Lawrence, I thought it was a good idea to bring in DJ Reader. You give them some depth. You give them some versatility. Like, build on your strengths sometimes is what I like to do, because I think that is something that is a good team building method. Is if you have something that's nearly a strength, build on it to make it a true strength. And if you have something that's truly a strength and there's something there to make it even better, sometimes you just got to go with it, right? You look at teams that have made it to the playoffs and even to the Super Bowl on the strength of really good defenses or really good offensive lines or really good wide receivers, like really good wide receiver play. There's so many times where if you just get that right mix of a really good strength, it can carry your team. You've seen it before with the Dallas Cowboys many times with their offensive line, the Eagles with their offensive and defensive lines, winning in the trenches. You look at it with the Broncos Super Bowls when they had the crazy defenses. You look at it with, and the other way you do it, really good quarterback play, also really good play callers. And so, I don't know how to feel about the play callers right now for the Giants. We feel okay with the DC. We feel mixed on the Matt Nagy hiring, maybe, I feel like, with everybody. But at the end of the day, it's going to really come down to, can you build around, first off, your rookie quarterback, who now opens you up for the ability to be very playful with your money because you don't have to pay your QB. Even if you just get top 15 play from that guy, it's pretty good play from your quarterback for the money you're paying him. And when you look at that defense, because they had a little bit, they should have had, is what I'm going to say. They should have had the money to pay Lawrence. They should have had the ability to feel like, hey, listen, we can get this deal done and make you happy and get it to work. That should have been on the books. Like, and you might be like, well, Walter, he signed a contract, right? He signed an extension. He decided to sign it. Why didn't he stick to his deal? Listen, if you're talking like that, man, I got a bunch of boots to sell you that you can go lick. Because the reality is, these players, when they renegotiate these contracts, they're fighting from a position of where the team just has all the power in the world. When you look at the rookie wage scale, that's not very competitive, right? The rookie wage scale, that's not capitalistic. You're already cutting down what the player can negotiate for. Why should the player not be able to make as much money on the open market just because, hey, well, we want to make it fair. We want to make it so that everybody is on the same playing field. Get rid of the franchise tag. Get rid of the rookie wage scale. Those are things that are made up BS that take away competition. But since we are playing in that game and we're playing in that world, the players have to negotiate their contracts in that world. And so Dexter Lawrence came to the end of his deal, or not the end of his deal, but the end of his guarantees. Dexter Lawrence came to the end of his guarantees, looked around and said, guys, if I get injured tomorrow, this is all I am getting. And I want more because God forbid my career is over next year from whatever happens, from an injury, from anything else. I want to take care of myself. I want to take care of my family. And that is something that's truly fair for any of these players to do. Dexter Lawrence played on, a deal for the last couple of years. That he did get, his extension. He got his money. Listen, it's part of the negotiation. Hey, guys, I'm not going to play until you extend me and you give me more money. And it's really more about the guarantees than anything else. That's always what it's about. You look at the APY, you look at what he just agreed to with the Bengals, right? $28 million 1 year extension right there. That made his deal $70 million over the next 3 years. That was very palatable for the team and him. And yeah, maybe he doesn't play out that deal. Maybe they renegotiate it next year. So what? So what if they renegotiate it next year? So what if this is a thing next year? You know what the Bengals are looking at? All right, we get 3 years with you. Oh, okay, well, we have a little bit more money. We have a little bit more cash space. Hey, you know what? You played very well this year, too. We'll keep on doing it. Like, for the money of $28 million for 1 year, by the way, that year is not next year. That year's 3 years into the future, and it creates and what it really is done, what's being done there, is because of that extension, you're getting the extra year for 28, and what you're really getting out of that extra year is what Dexter Lawrence really probably wants out of this extension is the money that he's getting from a signing bonus and a guarantee. Whatever that ends up being, whether it's just guaranteeing the rest of this year's deal, the signing and plus the signing bonus, which is probably going to break down to somewhere in the $40 to $50 million range, which is probably what he wanted. He probably wanted the rest of this year guaranteed plus next year's guarantees, or whatever the way it would math out, right? This year fully guaranteed plus a signing bonus of probably the equivalent of another year. Probably feels really good if he gets that. And and the Bengals probably walk away with, guys, we're paying him less than what we would have paid Trey Hendrickson in free agency. If they had extended him, you look at what Hendrickson got. He got $60 million guaranteed, and he's he's almost 3 years older. So they probably look at it as like, well, we couldn't really build around Hendrickson because we don't know how much longer he has. We probably think Dexter Lawrence has far more time on his playing lifespan, especially because D tackle tends to last pretty long in the NFL. And if it doesn't work out, we'll figure it out down the line. But you look at this draft class, and what were they getting at 10? It was maybe Mansour Delane, and listen, by the way, really good corners. You could still build around them, but currently in the NFL seems a lot of too high safety, and high-end corner play is not the value of what it was, say, 5 to 10 years ago, back in the days of Darrelle Revis, where you had a shutdown corner, a lot of man coverage. Everybody's playing a lot of zone right now, a lot of too high safety. Still playing man, but again, there is a lot of change-ups coming to the NFL, and things will shift over the years. Now, again, you can value those guys whatever way you want because you can utilize those high-end corners to shut down one side of the field. And that might be the guy who, by the way, the Giants might look at 10 now that they have 10. Because the Giants are going to be looking at this draft going, well, we went ahead and traded away our best defensive lineman. Hands down. Best defensive lineman of the last 10 years. You can make arguments for JPP and Vernon and Snacks. And I honestly think Dexter Lawrence probably has an argument above any of them at this point in time. I think just the level of play, what he does at a position that is, he's a unicorn. He is a very unique player. He is a unicorn at his position. So you look at what, but that's not to say the Giants don't have answers here. Now that they trade away, you just got to deal with the cards you have, right? That you cannot, this is the part where there's a silver lining for the Giants. You can't cry over spilt milk. It's over with. You don't have Dexter Lawrence anymore. You got the 10th overall pick. How do we, as Giants, make our team dominant? And one, I think you got to find a strength for your team. Now, whether that's the guy you take at 10, whether you think it's the guy you take at 5, or both, and then you rely on that strength to figure out, like, again, one way to do it is you draft a wide receiver and a guard / tackle in those 2 picks, right? Say they don't trade down. One scenario, Giants don't trade down. 5, they take Carnell Tate. 10, they take Ione Vega or Fano, guys who they have been connected to a lot in the last couple of months. You now have a pretty darn good wide receiving core, possibly a dominant guard if that guy plays as well as we think they will in the NFL, whether it's Fano or Vega. I think both those guys will be very good guards, depending on what scheme you want to run with them. I think also I think Fano can kick out to tackle eventually if Illuminor is no longer playing for them. Which, remember, Illuminor is 32. Right? Or going to be 32. So, again, dude, I love that extension. I thought that was a smart extension. That was my number one on the wish list for the offseason was them keeping Illuminor and them adding a high-end guard, preferably in free agency. I was hoping Teller or Elijah Vera Tucker. Neither of those guys panned out. Maybe they bring back Greg Van Roten, but I don't want to rely on a 34-year-old guard. And same thing with Zeitler, but at least Zeitler's had higher end play than Greg Van Roten's ever had in his career and has been far more consistent. So maybe they bring in Zeitler after the draft, and I'd feel pretty comfortable with that addition. As far as replacing what Dexter Lawrence did, bring in DJ Reader. You also got to probably bring in Shelby Harris now too, or Calais Campbell, because you got some cash to throw around, right? That's the good thing. You got some more cash. You didn't extend Lawrence. All right, replace it with vets and rookies. And part of the things you got to look at now in the draft is what guys can they get at D tackle? What guys can they get to fill out the rest of the room? How can they address their offensive line? Now, do they trade down from 10 is a big question, because I think there's about 13 there's 13 players in this draft that our teams feel very good about. And I'm not, or like probably 13 to 15 guys, right? And every team's going to have their own guys that they have in the top 15. So, and comes down to scheme and whether they feel like the player fits them and personality and the interviews. So, Giants still don't have a third round pick. So that might be another part. They have pick 105. They have a big gap between their second rounder and their 100 pick 105. So they are probably still interested in trying to accrue another day 2 pick somewhere in here. I would be down if they could figure that out. One of the things they could do, I don't know if they can pull off a trade to get that from 10. Maybe they can. Maybe they trade down from 10 down to the 20s. They utilize that to accrue another day 2 pick or two. I also think picking from 5, I think there's going to be an edge rusher there that a team's going to really want, where there's going to be a lot of interest in getting that guy, whether it's, Ruben Bain, Arvell Reese, although I think you can make the argument that now the Giants would be like a little bit more interested in Arvell Reese. There's been a little bit more connection with them, with Arvell Reese than Sonny Styles, at least kind of what you actually see versus what's being reported. I know there's a lot of talk about Sonny Styles. I'm not loving Sonny Styles, an off-ball linebacker with not really any kind of potential at edge rusher. Not loving that at 5. Always athletic, cool. He won the Underwear Olympics, great. Can he, what's his production profile? It's It's not really what you would take in the top 10. How's his tackling? A little high. Listen, maybe in between the years he's great, and that's a huge thing at linebacker, but what we also know is that linebacker, safety, those can be found in free agency for pretty easy money. And I say easy money as in like linebackers every year go for $10 to $15 million in free agency. You don't get that's your wide receiver 3. That's your wide receiver 3 or 4. That's not coming off a terrible year. Like Darnell Mooney was a wide receiver 3 that signed one of those deals 2 years ago. They signed him coming off a bad year for $5 million, but that's because teams don't believe in him anymore. They don't believe he can be a wide receiver 3 anymore. Now, I thought that was a good deal. And keep in mind, I think there's been some things that they've done that have been done very well. Again, I think bringing in Darnell Mooney and Calvin Austin as possible wide receiver 3 Band-Aids have been very good. I think the Giants also have to remember, or at least Giants fans have to also remember, Malik Neighbors might not be playing to start the year. He's coming off a pretty bad knee injury, and he might take some time to warm up. It might be not till October or November where you see old school Malik Neighbors. Trying to hope that guy comes back by the start of September is kind of very wishful thinking, given the extent of his injury. because it wasn't just your typical ACL. Not like there's anything known as a real typical ACL, because everybody's surgery is different, and we just are not privy to all the information. So as fans, everybody wants to make it sound like, well, Neighbors is going to be right back. Everybody, they're going to have Neighbors right away. Where Neighbors is going to be back. No, I actually don't think you can walk into this offseason thinking Neighbors is going to be back right away. I think you have to go the opposite direction. I think you have to think Neighbors is not going to be there that first month at least. Definitely not fully up to speed. So when you look at that receiving room, you have Isaiah Likely, who they signed in free agency. I think he's going to be a solid addition to that room. And again, you pay tight ends essentially what you would pay high-end, like basically wide receiver threes. Like they're paying, so you have Darnell Mooney, Calvin Austin, Darius Slayton. They no longer have Wan'Dale Robinson. He went to the Titans. So you're kind of missing a lot of pieces there. Scadaboo's coming off a major injury, although it does sound like he'll be back a little bit quicker than Neighbors, given the current reports by the head coach. So I don't know. I look at the Giants situation. I go, oh, they need a receiver. Like their receiving room looks terrible when you account for the fact that Neighbors probably won't be playing for the first month. And even if he is, he's probably not going to be fully up to speed. So what should they do? I think there's been a lot of talk that they take wide receiver at 5 behind closed doors. I don't think they're very eager to take Sonny Styles. I think that everybody's trying to connect him with Sonny Styles because they want everybody to think they're going to take Sonny Styles. Let's be real here. Hey, I don't benefit from you guys thinking knowing what I'm going to do at 5 because there's teams in front of me who might trade back. I also don't think that Carnell Tate's going to necessarily be there at 5. There are teams in front of them who could easily take Carnell Tate. Now, Jordan Tyson's the other one that you could talk about, right? There's a lot of connections with Jordan Tyson, with Joe Shane, meeting him in ASU. Everybody went to the ASU. Basically, Jordan Tyson on April 17th had a workout, and there was a lot of a Giants contingent there to go ahead and make sure he was healthy. And I definitely think there's talk about him going in the top 10 to the Giants, whether it's at 5 or whether it's at 10. I don't think he makes it to 10. If everybody feels comfortable about his hamstrings, he's going before that. And I think if with the guy who has had the injury concerns that he's had, I think it's a little concerning to take him at 5. So it's a very weird spot as far as Jordan Tyson goes. But if you feel good about his medicals, then and you love his movement skills, then maybe you go with Jordan Tyson. I'm still very much a Carnell Tate believer. I think he's my wide receiver 1. I'd rather him. I know the Giants have done a lot of homework on all the receivers who are expected to go in the first round, whether it's Tate, Tyson, Casey Concepcion, or Mekhi Lemon. All these dudes are expected to go round 1 at different spots. I definitely think the Giants are thinking of trying to trade back. Even before the Dexter Lawrence trade, I think they were thinking of trading back because, again, like I said before, they have a big gap between their second-round pick and then the pick they have at 105. I think they are looking at it going like, we kind of need more of these top 100 picks. It's a very, very narrow draft. Like, there's going to be some good depth pieces here, but it's not a great draft this year. It's good at different positions, and maybe they want to address those different positions. That's why there's a lot of talk with them with guard on day 2. The only kind of guard-ish talk that I've seen as far as like connections to them, they definitely have had some talk with Fano. I don't know if there's actually been any connection with them in Vega. Now, you have different people in charge of this year's draft with Harbaugh kind of being the leader and the one making the picks allegedly, but Shane is there, and I don't know who has like the control over the full board and all the interviews and everything. So listen, I'm going into this week with this NFL draft with the hope of maybe they trade down a little bit, either from 5 or 10. There's some D tackles in this draft. They've at least that could be some good additions. I know Lee Hunter is one of the dudes that maybe if they got an extra second rounder they could look at. McDonald, it was the Ohio State guy, McDonald. There's no connection with them so far, but that doesn't mean nothing. They weren't really expecting to be in this position. I'm guessing they probably felt good about their D tackle room, or at least okay, and that if they had to fill it out, they could do veterans and day 2 guys. Now they might be in a little bit different of a position. Caleb Banks is a dude who maybe look at on day 2. I think they have to find another top 50 pick now. I think they have to find the way to get another top 50, top 75 pick, because when you look at the way the NFL draft works, the hit rate in the top 15 has a very specific percentage of hit rate versus the top. Then from 15 to 50, there's a different percentage, which is why when your first round grades go, You often see a lot of teams trade back, and that's when the trade backs start to happen. So when you start seeing like certain values go, that's where you get a little bit more eager, certain tier drop-offs to trade back. So, hey, if Carnell Tate's not there at 5 and the Giants are sitting there and there's a team calling to get to Ruben Bain at 5, they might be more eager. I think there's a lot more tied to them getting one of these pass catchers and offensive linemen. I think they're going to really try to attack offensive line in this draft. I don't think linebacker's the call unless it's Arvell Reese, because I just think Arvell Reese is a different kind of cat with the pass rush upside and just the bend and the and his athleticism has just got a different type of athleticism than Sonny Styles. I think it's just a different type of play, the versatility, and again, like also because Arvell Reese could also play linebacker, you now have a lot of versatility with him. Some of the other D tackle prospects, I think, they've definitely probably done homework on them, but now they're probably leaning, going like, you know what, man, we got to probably recheck what we're thinking about some of these D tackles on day 2, because there's not a lot of love for them in round 1. Again, I think trading down from one of these top 10 picks is definitely in the cards. It's also very much a Ravens thing to do, which Harbaugh is coming from the Ravens. So I don't know. I look at the end of this, I go, I liked the Harbaugh signing. I liked Dawn Aponte coming in. Clearly, Joe Shane is somewhat still involved with these contract negotiations. Whether you believe all the rumors of whether or not he was able, he messed up the Elijah Vera Tucker situation. Don't know if I really believe that one. Sometimes players just go where they want to go. Although apparently there might have been sometimes with this stuff, you're hearing a lot of like rumors about like the numbers, the years, and like the years matter. People like fight, and the years matter in a way that a lot of people don't give credit to the years, right? People think players want more years on their deal. They don't. Teams want more years on the deal. So when we're hearing this discussion, I think Connor Hughes reported that the Giants tried to offer Dexter Lawrence $28 million a year, nearly. I didn't say actually $28 million, nearly $28 million a year. But they wanted more years. That's not the same contract he got with the Bengals. That's not the same deal. And so, like, you could sit there and push back on it and be like, well, they wanted to give him $28 million. Yeah, but they wanted to add 2 or 3 more years on the end of it. That's not the same thing. Then you're really back to what you're at here, at least with, like, the current situation with the Bengals. I don't know if Dexter Lawrence comes back to them next year and says, I want to redo my deal again, unless he really, really outperforms it. But I think adding that $28 million depends on how many more guarantees are added to the deal. But if he feels secure for the next 2 years, I don't think you see it. Maybe, but I don't think you do. As far as, the Giants, if they had added 2 more years and it's $28 million, he's always going to feel underpaid. He's always going to feel like he's not making the money he's deserving. And again, like Dexter Lawrence, man, like I saw this guy in person on an NFL field at a practice a couple years ago. And that was that first year of the blow. You just kind of look at him, you go, oh, that's a different kind of defensive player. That's a different kind of dude. Like, that guy is so big. Again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. He makes other players look tiny. Big players look tiny. He made Kayvon Thibodeau look small. Just when you see these guys stand next to each other and you see Dexter Lawrence, you go, oh, now I understand. Like, follow, subscribe. If you want, you can follow me at BROJO. Death is in the end of life. Punch like a delicious drink you drink in the summer. I'll miss you, Dexter. Have fun in Ohio.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous about the past and about the people.